Well, okay, class, you hung around there, you endured part one, so let's get into part two, shall we? And finish up with Coach Warren's 24. We got past 13, well, let's just get into it, shall we? Let's finish this bad boy. All right. Appeal to players' pride. Well, what kind of pride? Well, pride in performance and pride in proper preparation. Now, you got to understand something about Coach Warren. He's old school, and he does not subscribe to the everyone gets a trophy thought because he thinks the things need to be earned. And that's the only way that you will be able to derive some kind of pride is if you work for it and you achieve. Um, Confidence comes from competence, not the other way around. You don't just give people stuff and have them appreciate it. It's very much as if you worked and you scrimped and you saved for your first car, and even if it was a POS, you bought it. Yep, that's a reflection of your sweat and tears, etc., as opposed to somebody just flipping you the keys and saying, "Here you go, kiddo, it's all yours." I mean, it would be nice, but you didn't earn it. So, pride in performance and pride in proper preparation. Now, in psychology, there's a group of theories called just not going to be tested on this necessarily. This is a casual aside, but they're called attribution theories, and it's $1 million phrase. And what it speaks to is the things, the qualities, the behaviors, etc., that you attribute your failures and your successes to. In other words, if you do very, very well, to what do you attribute that excellent performance? Was it because you worked your butt off? Was it because you tried maybe harder, maybe longer than the guy or the gal across from you? Whatever it is, there is a pride that comes from toil and comes from overcoming obstacles. If you have always followed and someone has been plowing the field for you all of your life, life can be pretty brutal because if you're young and you experience obstacles and you experience failure, at least you're young and you're resilient and you can learn to overcome those things. Remember that improvise, adapt, and overcome. But if the first time that you ever encounter an obstacle uh, and you're 25 or you're 35, well, that, boy, oh boy, you're going to have a tough time with that, my friend. You really will. And you're not going to get over it very quickly. So pride in performance, how well did you do? But pride in your proper preparation. Did you lay the groundwork? Did you do what was necessary? Did you do what was sufficient or was it excessive? It's really up to you. And this is what those things that amount to your experiential base speak to. The number of obstacles you encounter and the obstacles that you overcome. What's that quote that I saw from General George S. Patton? It says, "I'm not interested in how high a man rises. I'm interested to see how high he bounces when he hits the bottom." That's interesting. These next two, I took a little bit of license here, so I hope you forgive me. But I inserted these because I think that they're necessary and that they're germane to the discussion. Both of them are samurai maxims. The first one is bleed in the dojo and laugh on the battlefield. And this speaks to front loading everything. If you're a coach or a trainer, uh, you need to take note of what is going to be, or what the conditions are under which you're going to be competing. And your practice, and what I call in all of my books, PCTWO, pick two, PCTWO, which is practice, conditioning, training, and working out. Now, they're all basically the same thing. They're preparations for a contest. But depending upon the sport and the athletic endeavor, we call it different things. But they're all training. They're all getting ready for the game or getting ready for the competition. So, bleed in the dojo, laugh in the battlefield. This speaks to working hard and working long and having your preparation, your pick two, practice, conditioning, training, and working out, at least, in order for it to be any good for you whatsoever, it needs to be at least as demanding as the competition. Because if it is not, then you've done your players no service, because they're going to get out there and they're going to be out of their depth. I'm always reminded, every time I give this lecture, I reflect back on a Winter Olympics, couple of Winter Olympics ago. And one of our guys was out there as a snowboarder and mogul runner. And he was out of the competition, but the conditions were really bad since he was being interviewed. And he says to the interviewer, the conditions here are terrible. They're absolutely terrible. I mean, we don't train in conditions like this. We have an indoor facility, and this is ridiculous. Well, I just came up out of the seat and I said, that coach, whoever that young man's coach is, needs to be sued for malpractice. There's no excuse for that, especially at the Olympic level. What do you think this is? Some kind of a country fair? Anyway, you put your. I got news for you. If he were my charge, if I was his trainer, if I was his coach, I got news for you. You'd be going down a solid granite face on that snowboard. You would fall down, yeah, but you would certainly appreciate that you don't want to fall down, and at least you'd have that as a frame of reference for the next time you encountered, quote, bad circumstances and bad environments. So front load your stuff. If you do that, then everything else after that follows. If you do not do that, you're going to have to go back and redo it. So it's not you being cruel. As a matter of fact, you're saving your athletes. You don't want the first time they encounter something to be on the field or the track or the pitch or the wherever or the court. You don't want them to have to deal with the situation as well as the novelty of the situation for which they have no frame of reference. They're going to be out there and they're going to be so distracted they won't know what to do. So front load all of your training. Front load it. Do it up front. This is where the heavy lifting is done. This is where the trial and error, the experimentation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everything is done up front. You don't allow it. See, the people, muggles, non-athletic folk, don't understand. They think that practice should be pretty easy because the competition is rough. That is 180 out, guys. It's 180 out. It's completely backwards. If you do your training properly, if you do what is necessary and you impose that level of pick two onto your athletes, by the time they get to the contest, it's going to be a joke. That's a cakewalk. You know what they're going to be worried about, though? Practice Monday morning. Yeah. The last one here is you will always fight as you train. This is a Marshall maxim, but it's also something that I took with me from my Marshall training into naval aviation. You're always going to fight as you train. The way that your level of your exertion, the amount of energy, the amount of attention, the time that it takes, etc., your timing, everything, that's what you train. That is your pick two. So your practice conditioning training and working out, you'll always fight as you train. If you train at a lower level, see, again, muggles think that, and our lexicon is full of statements like this. Well, he found it within himself. He rose to the occasion. No, you're not going to rise to the occasion. When the stuff hits the fan, you know what you're going to do? You're going to fall to your level of training because you will always revert to your training. Always. And I speak this fluently. In an emergency situation. I switch off. I don't switch on. I switch off because I know what to do and I allow my training to take over. So you'll always fight as you train. You train hard. You train high to a high standard. That's where when you're confronted with a situation, that's not too far to fall. I think you can do the math on the other. If you're nice and easy and your coach is taking it easy on you, okay, come on, you knuckleheads, let's call it a day. No. You're going to get your backside handed to you, and you don't want that. Okay, number 15. Any of you had my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Jeff Duke? Because every time I give this slide here, every time I give this lecture, I think of Dr. Duke. Because this is him in a nutshell. If you've ever taken his coaching theory or his coaching methods classes, everything is based on love. What is it? It's best. It's not enough they care. It's more important they know you care. That's paraphrasing the good doctor, but the best motivator in love. If you've ever received an email message from Dr. Jeff. At the bottom, we all have our little sign off things, from promise to prominence. Mine says expect what you tolerate, but I'll explain that to you in another. Expect what you tolerate. Oh, tolerance. Okay, well, if you accept and you tolerate laziness and sloth and insubordination, then expect it. Expect what you tolerate. Dr. Duke says, give them heaven. Not give them hell, but give them ... heaven, because that's what he's all about. So let's get into what Coach Warren has to say. He says that people are always looking for a sense of belonging. That's what's so powerful about a team, and it's just as powerful about an individual athlete or an individual patient with their doctor or their treating professional or their trainer, a client with their trainer. They're looking for a sense of belonging. They're looking for a relationship, and they're looking for something to provide an anchor so as to solidify both the necessity for the training as well as the validation and validity of the training. So they're looking for a place to fit, and that's important because remember, getting back to try to regain trust after it's broken. Well, it's hard enough to gain trust in the first place. Try to regain it, probably not going to happen. I don't care what happens and how well things are patched together. The old expression that you'll forgive, but you ain't going to forget. So you're going to have that asterisk next to you. Oh, yeah, I trust him, but there was that time. Yeah. And this other one here is an Adlerian phrase. If anybody remembers back to your general psych, Alfred Adler from the late 19th and early 20th century. He was kind of the father of humanistic psychology. Anyway, he talked about striving for superiority, and it's often misunderstood because, the uninitiated and the pinheads of the world to back up and say, well, you're just trying to be better than me. Well, yes, I am. And I'm working my backside off to ensure that I will always be better than you. But that's not it. That's not the challenge. See, people see that and they go, oh, all I have to worry about is the other people. No. Haven't you figured it out yet? The greatest battles, the hardest standards that you have to meet are your own standards. And the toughest combatant that you have, opponent that you have, is you. You. Listen to the way you talk to yourself. Listen to the way you talk to yourself, especially when, what we used to call in the Navy, you screw the pooch. In other words, you really mess up. I mean, are you kind and considerate and encouraging, or do four-letter expletives flow that would make this sailor blush? But striving for superiority, what he's really talking about here is, yes, striving for superiority against others, but for most part, other people are a minute stake. I'll let that sink in. Other people are a minute stake, most of them. The toughest opponent you're ever going to have is striving for superiority against yourself, and not just yourself today, but yourself yesterday. And you're always on the rise. You're always challenging. You're never settling. There's an old expression that says, if you want to settle down, you're going to have to settle. Well, don't settle for this. Be content, but never be satisfied. So appreciate what you've got, but you ain't done. You have miles to go before you sleep. So this striving for superiority is consistent with a place to fit and seeking a sense of belonging, because everybody needs a place of sanctuary, and that'll factor in to another lecture here in the coming weeks. I'm not going to spend any time with this. He says, do not permit yourself to become sexually or emotionally involved with your players. And this is me. Oh, brothers, does this really actually need clarification? I mean, if you get involved with it, you're a fool, and you need to figure something else out in life. You want fries when that comes to mind. But you're going to be dealing very intimately with people's lives. And they're going to be coming to you cap in hand. They're looking for guidance. They're looking for mentorship. They're looking for advice. They're looking for something, and they're coming to you, and they can get no help anywhere, but they're coming to you. It's a heady experience, and I want you to fully appreciate that. So this right here, I'm not going to spend any time on this. If you fall prey to this, then, man, you get bigger problems, and nothing I can do for you. All right. This is kind of a timely problem it's kind of a sine wave. It comes on, it comes back, and it fades, and then it comes back. And here recently, some schools have relented. But he says never offer players money, gifts, or material incentives for performance. You start paying for performance, and you'll never get them to work for any other reason. Now, it's a big debate that's been ongoing for the past, good grief, as long as I've been in education, certainly past 30 years, 40 years maybe. But because college football, college basketball, college baseball, soccer, whatever, college sports, it's a multi-billion with a B dollar business. It is a business too. So while we hold the carrot out there and say, here, we're going to give you a scholarship, we're going to feed you, house you, and give you the stage upon which you can demonstrate your prowess, that is not seen as enough. And there's been some moves, especially out in the West, where most of the strange moves in human evolution and societal evolution have occurred, are now going to pay athletes a piece of the action for using their name on the back of the jersey that is owned by the school. So guys, here, let me cut to the chase on this, because this is the never-ending story. I'm not asking that you come to a conclusion necessarily and you put a final period in it and that's it and you're done. I would certainly consider this, and I'd discuss it amongst yourselves, and I would be informed, and I would have ready responses. I've been listening to this argument for the past 30, 40 years, and I still have heard excellent points made by both sides. So it's up to you to at least be informed. Have the information so that you can at least come into the war of wits with a weapon. Don't come into a war of wits with a blank slate. That's it's no fun for anybody. Okay. This one I'm going to write off. Simply because this is a little dated. Coach Warren came up with his 24 tenets back in the 1980s, late 80s, early 90s. And this is before the NCAA requirements and restrictions and everything else. So I'll give you the first one. Yeah, clean a gym or a field as a team. That always impressed me. And where it really came to roost, I was first introduced to this, was my first martial art back in 1965. Good grief, 64. I think it was 10. Anyway, it was judo. And that martial arts wasn't like it is today, where every strip mall and shopping center has an after-school babysitting program disguised as martial arts. But here, judo, it was a traditional dojo, and wow, it was really intense. But I noticed that even as a little boy in a oversized gi with a white belt, after class, we all lined up, and it was on hardwood floors with tatami mats. Well, after the class, we would all bow to the master, bow to the instructors, bow to the black belts, bow to flags, etc., etc. We would everybody would roll up the tatami mats, and then we would take towels and dry off all the sweat so as to clean the dojo for the next class. And the thing that impressed me here, clean the gym or field as a team, was that the master and the senior black belt instructors all were in there too. Everybody was in it. So they weren't just sitting there having a cup of tea, watching everybody else. No, they were in there and they were doing it themselves, because it was not seen as humiliating work. It was not seen as demeaning work. It was seen as teamwork. And they had worked this, and they are offering themselves. What is the best way to lead? By example. Yes, you've heard that before. It's part of our lexicon. So clean the gym or the field as a team. Try to instill this. I always tell my peeps, look, if you're in a business and whatnot, and the bathroom needs to be cleaned and there's nobody around, damn it, roll up your sleeves. Do it. And you know what? Even more, let them see you doing it. You're nothing special. You are part of the team. Don't ask anything that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. The second one, write personal letters outlining individual and team goals. there are some prohibitions on that, and there's all sorts of HIPAA things. So it's kind of strike that. Early recruiting from local quote farm teams unquote. No NCAA violation. If they find that you've done this, they will shut you down and your program is done. It's over. Just like trying to establish feeders. While there are no formal feeders or farm teams, there are some that still exist pre 1980 that are traditional uh, feeders for all intents and purposes. Now there's still a free agent. You're still out there looking around, but University of Miami, Florida State, University of Florida, USF, UCF now is kind of coming into its own. But Auburn, all the big programs have traditional high schools that want their students. Their students want to because it's a history and a lineage, kind of a tradition. So anyway, take this with a grain of salt. Just don't worry about the last two. Certainly not the last two. Build your program around players you can motivate. Yeah, look for the silver lining. Um, and again, every time I give this lecture, I think about coaches caught in absolutely untenable positions. If you've seen the film We Are Marshall, if you've seen Remember the Titans, just I know you probably watched it before, maybe several years ago, but go back and watch it now with what you know about psychology and look at the masterful job that both Matthew McConaughey and Denzel Washington did with their teams. It's mind blowing. It is. Well, come on. Would you have accepted the coaching position that either of those two got into? Weir Marshall, the entire team was blown away. They were all killed, all the major coaching staff and most of the boosters. Oh, I remember that. I remember that. I was around when that happened. I mean, it wasn't just that it affected Marshall; it affected the entire collegiate league. Everybody went into mourning. Everybody was in shock. Um, and then the other one with the racial discord in Remember the Titans. Oh my God, it's just so masterful. We'll talk about this as we proceed through several future lectures because I can come back and relate to that. But if you have the opportunity to see either of those films again, and including the program, that's another great one, James Caan. Um, Go ahead and take a look at it, but look at it with refreshed eyes and look at it from your perspective now as a kinesiology major, looking at it as a professional rather than just an onlooker or a face at the window. So what does he say here? Build your program around players you can motivate. Yeah, look for that silver lining. Be an astute observer. There's so much to say here, probably better said in the second part of the semester because this is going to be relying upon self-improvement. However, the two words that I gave you when I gave you my first lecture, pay attention. I hearken back to that because I go back and state that I can sum up everything we're going to be talking about during this entire semester with those two words. Pay attention. Now, some of you are rolling your eyes and just going, oh, come on, Doc. No, I'm hoping that as we proceed through, you're going to eventually pay so much attention that you're going to notice more. And as a consequence, there's my grad students commenting on my point. But as a consequence, you're going to be able to see things beyond what others do. You're going to see what others merely look at. You're going to be blessed with insights. And what's more, you're going to be able to see things happening before the guy or the gal across the field from you more quickly, and you're going to be able to take corrective actions on far less information because you are paying attention. So this last one here, beware of toxic people. Well, come on, guys, you college students, for gosh sakes, you know toxic people. Here's just a question. It's not necessarily rhetorical, but it could be. Have you ever outgrown a friend? Yeah. Well, have you ever had to blow off a friend or what you thought was a friend? When somebody does you wrong, it's a fait accompli, and it's not a big deal. But sometimes toxic people don't dismiss them out of hand here. Sometimes people can be useful as positive exemplars, but they can also be extraordinary examples of what you don't want to do. So, toxic people sometimes, like I mentioned a few moments ago, if you've ever outgrown a friend, it wasn't anything that they did, and it wasn't anything big confrontation or anything else. You just kind of sort of grew apart, and they were doing their thing, and you were doing yours, and you just kind of stopped texting and stopped seeing them and stopped calling them. And it's just kind of the way of the world. Don't dismiss them. We're going to talk about this in another lecture about pruning carefully, but we'll talk about that then. Stress total effort and striving for excellence in everything you do. Yeah, you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. Kind of sounds kind of like a Kenny Rogers song, doesn't it? Yeah. But knowing when to hold them and knowing when to fold them, this comes from experience, guys, and this comes from paying attention. This comes from putting yourself out there in the mix. So you gain this, and this is going to be a reflection of the decisions you make from the experiential base and the web of these frames of reference that you've collected all of your life. Um, if you have more and more and more of them, you're going to have more and more and more options. If you don't have so many, you're only going to have limited. It's either going to be kind of this or that, or maybe you won't even have the that. Maybe it's just this. That's all I know. So, but anyway, it's an opportune time for me to inject this because this is one of those phrases I'm known for. Don't ever, ever, ever in contest. Don't ever allow yourself to lose. Never let your team walk off the field with their tail tucked and pissing and moaning and throwing helmets or throwing balls or throwing bats. What? No. Don't ever lose. You either win or you learn. You take something away from that. You take a lesson away, because the only way you can really lose is to not take a lesson away and get your butt handed to you again exactly the same way. Shame on you. You didn't learn a thing, did you? So, this next one, perfection is an ideal. Yeah, I've seen this in my practice since I first got into practice. It's interesting that I do see perfectionists, and a lot of the people that I see in the professional ranks and senior amateur ranks and even the Olympic ranks have a perfectionist streak. And even though they will acknowledge that perfection is an ideal and therefore is pretty much unattainable, I mean, we can have flashes of brilliance, but nobody is perfect all the time. It just doesn't happen. So I try to get them to reframe this rather than talk in terms of perfection. I ask, would you settle for excellence? Would you settle for excellence? And sometimes that, because excellence is a little more forgiving. You got some latitude there. You can still, you can't be the very, very best, but you can be enough. And that brings us to another discussion about how when you're engaged in competitions, you don't have to beat the pants off the guy or the gal you're up against. In most sports, all it takes is one. So you just have to be a little bit better. You don't have to beat them to death. You don't have to run them into the ground. All it takes is one. Sometimes in a race, all you need to be is a thousandth of a second faster. That's it. So, aspire to be aware of all you do. Yeah, that's a fancy way of saying pay attention. And remember the little things in life. Gosh, our lexicon is rife with these kinds of expressions. Devil's in the details. Don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. Well, you better sweat the small stuff. Small stuff has a real nasty habit of becoming big stuff when you neglect it. So, once again, pay attention. Did I mention pay attention? I think I did. Okay. Set high but realistic expectations for yourself and your team. People ask me all the time. I get inquiries about this. Where do you set the bar? Because I have pretty high standards, and for myself and for others. And my wife will be quick to tell you that I do not suffer fools. I do not suffer fools, and it's cost me sometimes because. That's another discussion. But where do you set the bar? Where do I set the bar? I set it very high. But that's natural. And then that's the perfectionist in me. And then I go ahead and bitch slap myself back down to reality and I try to settle for excellence. But research has consistently shown that the most motivating, the most performance enhancing place to set the bar is just out of reach. Just out of reach. So you're sitting there, and I'm using a metaphor, of course, but you're sitting there, you're trying for it, you're trying for it, you're trying for it, and then you get it. And then you're trying for it, and you try it, and then you get it, and then you get it, and then you get it again. You got three in a row. Where? Wow, what do I do? Well, you reset the bar. Question is, where do you reset the bar? Answer is, you reset it just out of reach. And then you go about your business trying to reach it again. And if you hit it again three times, you set it again just out of reach. And if you're keeping your journal, by the way, how are your journals coming? Uh-huh. Keep your journals, guys. Trust me on this. It's going to be one of the most valuable things you're going to take from this class. I'll continue to hound you on it. Now, you're on the honor system. There's nothing I can do. I'm not interested in your journal. I'm interested in you learning something about your journal and being able to pass that on to your patients and to your clients and to your athletes. So, just out of reach, if you document this in your journal, all you need to do is go back and take a look at all these little victories. In my practice, I got news for you. In my practice, journals are mandatory. I've fired patients. I've fired patients for noncompliance. Did you bring your journal? I asked them to bring it to every meeting. Did you bring your journal? Well, Jock, I didn't keep it. I'm not much of a writer. And oh, really? Well, I'm not much of a patient guy, so you're fired. And by the way, you pay my fee for wasting my time. But just out of reach. If you do this, you can get back there and you can see this history of successful accomplishment. Boom, 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 boom. I remember one patient, this was some time ago, and admittedly, he was angry, and he was not angry. Came across as an angry young man, but he was fresh out of rehab and fresh out of knee surgery, so he was scared, and he was wondering if he was going to come back. Ultimately, he did. I'll cut to the punch on there. But he was complaining that he just wasn't getting any better. Doesn't get any better. And I said, well, okay. Did you bring your journal? Yes. Have you been keeping it? Yes. Okay. When my record showed the last time I saw you was on June 3rd. Go back then, because that was the last time we saw each other, and I know you were keeping it then. Where were you? Then he reads and he reads and he reads. Now remember, this is his words talking to him. He's not writing it for me. He's writing it for him. And if there's a lie in there somewhere, it's him lying to himself. I got nothing to do with it. And by the way, why would you lie to yourself? That doesn't serve anybody. So anyway, he sees it, and then there's no argument. It's in your handwriting. You wrote it. You were started way back there, and look where you are now. You're almost done. Almost done. So you need to stay the course, bro. Stay the course. So, and I just put this in here. SMART goals. We know they're supposed to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time limited. This is very important if you're going to engage in goal setting. It has to have all of those. And if it doesn't, then it's going to fall through the cracks, and it's going to be vague, and it won't have any meaning. And well, here. This outline goals clearly. Make them foolproof. Make it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. That's the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. But if we go back to specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time limited as elements of the SMART goal setting paradigm, how does this fit in? Because this is most parents. Just go out there and do your best, okay? Okay. What? That's not specific. It doesn't tell you anything. It's like people who sit down and say, "Okay, I just got to lose. I got not. I've got an even better one than I got to lose. I got to get into shape." Well, interesting, but you are already in a shape. Not a particularly appealing one, maybe reminiscent of a landing craft, but you're in a shape. So, can you be a little bit more specific? Can you be measurable? Can you make it attainable? It's got to be time limited, and it's got to be realistic. So once you get all of this down, this is the essence of goal setting. If you're going to go and live your life by goal setting, then damn it, do it correctly. Otherwise, you're just setting yourself up for failure. And well, I don't know, perhaps that in itself might be your goal. So just go out there and do your best. Wow. Oh, okay. Okay, number 23. Yeah, don't take all the fun out of playing the game. Yeah, all work and no play. Everybody saw The Shining, didn't you? All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Yeah. But Coach Warren says when a passion becomes perceived as work, it's all over. It's all over. Conversely, if you can get paid for your hobby that you have a passion for, oh my God, then you work, then according to, once again, our lexicon, you never work another day in your life. Extraordinary. So, um, getting back to that, seeking counsel from swimming or track coaches, asking them about motivation. How do they keep it fresh? Talk to them. What do they do to keep it interesting? D- any particular techniques or tactics or stunts or whatever? Is there anything that you can do? So, and then number 24, avoid public actions or statements that may serve to motivate your opponents. Don't be your own worst nightmare. Don't be your own worst enemy. Remember the awareness. You're always under the microscope. Someone is always watching you. Let me just give you this too, because something just flashed. Back in the '90s, when I first came to UCF, one of my job, we still had PE back then. And anyway, I was a supervisor, internship supervisor. So I was going around to elementary, middle, and high schools where I had some of the interns out there working under coaches and going through the gyrations, and I'd get reports and things like this, and I monitored them, etc. Um, and I always remember that I was out at an elementary school. I think we were second graders or first graders, and one of my one of my interns was out there and he was a triathlete, and the week before he was in a competition and he got messed up in the peloton, had a huge crash, took out about 30 riders. I mean, they all just ended up in a big heap, and he had road rash and skins and black eye, and hit his head and everything. Oh, fortunately wearing a helmet. But when when we were there, I was talking to the coach, and coach told the intern, "Go ahead and line them up, and let's get them on in." So he blew the whistle, and we were sitting here looking at the clipboard and just going over some things. And I looked up, and my intern, because of his wounds, fresh wounds, he was limping and kind of being Father Goose out there in front of this little procession of first or second graders, can't remember which. But it was interesting because most of the kids, most of the kids right behind him were limping too for no reason. They all wanted to be just like Coach. And so while he was limping, they were all limping too. Oh, it was hilarious, but it taught me something. Especially when you're working with kids, that's all they do is they look at you, they want to be like you, and they emulate you. So be careful of that. So this awareness, yeah, gamesmanship. Sometimes you can do the remember the Titans. You can fake them out, but avoid public actions. Poker face. I'll spare you my Lady Gaga sub reference again, but poker face. Don't let anybody read your face. Certainly not calling you signals or robbing you signals or anything else. But be the Pat Riley. If you can, or if you're going to be the opposite, uh, then be that way all the time. Don't just be that way once in a while where people can read between the lines. Okay, guys, well, that's all of Coach Warren. And I think next lecture we're going to get into Dr. Orlick and see what he has to say in his brilliance. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed it. See ya.